Tonight, we will embark on a gentle journey, not to a destination, but into the present moment. We will discover the timeless wisdom of the Buddha. These are teachings that have been a refuge for unhappy and restless minds for more than 2,500 years. These are not rules to follow or doctrines to memorize. They are invitations. Invitations to see differently, to soften your grip, and to uncover the deep well of peace that has always existed within you. We will walk this path through ancient stories and simple, profound truths that speak not to the busy mind, but to the silent, knowing heart. We will learn to see our thoughts not as masters, but as passing clouds. We will see our difficult emotions not as enemies, but as messengers calling us toward healing. Welcome to Silent Universe Channel. This is your sanctuary, a space to rest your mind and nourish your spirit. There is nothing you need to do, nothing to fix, and no one else you need to become. Just open your ears and listen to me. If this path of silent reflection calls to something deep within you, I invite you to subscribe so you can return to this space whenever you need to remember that peace is your birthright. For now, just breathe. Let's begin this journey together, understanding the nature of suffering. Our journey into deep peace begins with a gentle and honest look at the nature of our own minds. It begins with one of the Buddha's most fundamental teachings, a truth that, once understood, opens the door to liberation. This is the teaching often called suffering, but a better word might be friction. This is the pervasive, omnipresent sense of dissatisfaction, the feeling that nothing is quite right. It is the stress we feel when we resist the natural flow of life, when we cling to what is pleasant and push away what is painful. This friction is not a punishment or a flaw in our character. It is a fundamental part of the human experience when the mind is untrained. When we turn toward this friction with a soft and curious gaze, we take the first real step toward an unshakable peace. The story of the Weaver Woman. Once upon a time, there was a young woman named Mara who lived in a village at the foot of a great mountain. Mara was a weaver, and her skill was unmatched. She wove tapestries of incredible beauty, their colors as vibrant as sunrise, their patterns as intricate as a spider's web. People came from all over the kingdom to buy her works. Mara's identity, her sense of self-worth, was woven into every thread. I am a great weaver. This is who I am, she believed. For a time, this brought her great happiness, but with her success came a silent fear. Each new tapestry had to be more beautiful than the last. She would lie awake at night, her mind racing with designs, worried that her inspiration would one day vanish. The joy of creation slowly became tainted with the anxiety of expectation. One day, a royal messenger arrived with a commission from the king. The king wanted a tapestry that captured the essence of the entire kingdom, its forests, its rivers, its people, its spirit. This was the greatest honor of her life, and it terrified her. She built a new, larger loom and bought the most expensive silk and gold threads. For weeks, she tried to begin, but her hands would tremble. The immensity of the task paralyzed her. The fear of not being perfect, of not living up to her own reputation, was a cage from which she could not escape. Her loom stood empty, like a monument to her fear. Her once joyful workshop became a place of dread. She withdrew and became unhappy. The friction in her mind was constant torment. One evening, unable to bear the silence of her workshop any longer, she walked up the mountain path as the sun began to set. She came to a small monastery where an old nun lived, known for her quiet wisdom. Mara explained her predicament in a voice choked with despair. The old nun listened patiently, her eyes as calm as a deep forest pool. When Mara had finished, the nun offered no advice or solutions. She simply said, "Come, let us watch the sunset." Together, they sat on a rock overlooking the valley. The sky was a canvas of brilliant oranges, deep purples, and soft pinks. It was breathtakingly beautiful, a masterpiece of light and color, changing every second. "No one expects the sunset to stand still," the nun said softly. "Its beauty lies in its vanishing. It doesn't wonder whether tonight's sunset is more beautiful than last night's. It simply is." Then she looked at Mara with profound compassion. "You are not the weaver. You are the loom. Life is the weaver. Joy, fear, inspiration, and emptiness are all just threads of different colors. You've been trying to control the threads, to weave only with golden threads. But a tapestry of only one color has no depth. Your problem is not that you are afraid. The problem is that you believe you shouldn't be." Mara felt the truth of these words settle deep into her bones. The tension in her shoulders began to release. She was not her success. She was not her fear. She was the space through which these things moved. She walked down the mountain under a star-filled sky. The next morning, she went to her workshop. She took a deep breath and began to weave. She didn't try to weave the perfect tapestry. She wove what was in her heart that day, the color of her fear, the texture of her anxiety, but also the deep purple of the sunset and the silver of the starlight. The tapestry she created was unlike any she had made before. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. It was alive. And in the act of weaving her whole self, not just the good parts, she found her freedom. The Buddha's teachings. Mara's story is our story. The friction, the dukkha, is not the royal commission or the fear of failure. It is clinging to an identity, resisting the full spectrum of our human experience. The Buddha's first noble truth points directly to this. Life inevitably contains unpleasant experiences. Sickness, loss, disappointment. These are part of the landscape. The second noble truth tells us that our suffering arises not from these experiences themselves, but from our craving, our thirst for reality to be different. Mara was suffering because she craved to be only the perfect weaver. She was resisting the threads of fear and doubt. This craving is a natural instinct of the untrained mind. We are conditioned to chase pleasure and avoid pain. We build our identities around our successes and strengths and try to hide our vulnerabilities. But this is like trying to build a dam in the middle of a flowing river. The pressure just builds. The Buddha's teaching is a radical invitation to stop building the dam. Practical applications to bring this wisdom into your life. You don't need to be a weaver or a monk. You can start right where you are, in the midst of your daily experience. First practice becoming an observer. Begin to observe the friction in your own mind. When you feel that familiar tightening of anxiety, that flash of irritation, or that pang of disappointment, try not to immediately get lost in the story. Instead, pause. Take one conscious breath, and just for a moment step back and observe the feeling as if you were a scientist watching a strange weather pattern. Name it gently to yourself. Ah, this is disappointment, or this is the feeling of wanting things to be different. This simple act of nomming and observing creates a space of awareness. In that space, you are no longer the emotion. You are the one who is aware of the emotion. This is the beginning of freedom. Second step, exploring the underlying craving. Get curious about the underlying craving. What is the mind thirsting for in this moment? If you're frustrated in a traffic jam, the craving is for the traffic to disappear, for reality to bend to your schedule. If you're hurt by a friend's comment, the craving is for their words to have been different, for the past to be rewritten. See if you can identify this underlying desire without judging it. See it with the same gentle curiosity you would have for a child who wants it to be sunny on a rainy day. Third step, softening your body. Our mental resistance manifests as physical tension. When you notice that friction, scan your body. Is your jaw tight? Are your shoulders hunched? Is your stomach in a knot? Consciously invite these parts of your body to soften. You can't think your way out of resistance, but you can breathe your way through it. As you exhale, imagine the tension gently dissolving. By practicing in these small moments, you are retraining your mind. You are teaching it that it is safe to feel the full spectrum of life. Impermanence, embracing change. We continue our journey by exploring a truth that is both profoundly simple and radically transformative. This is the teaching of impermanence, or anicca. The universe is in a constant state of flux. Nothing is static. Not the mountains, not the stars, not our bodies, and not our thoughts. Everything that arises will eventually pass away. We often experience this truth as a source of anxiety. We fear loss. We grieve change and desperately try to hold on to moments of happiness as if they were solid objects. But the Buddha taught that our suffering comes not from the fact of change, but from our resistance to it. The teaching of impermanence is not a lament. It is a gateway to freedom. The story of the potter master. In a valley nestled between two great mountains, there lived a master potter. Her name was Isara, and her work was renowned throughout the land for its exquisite beauty and near-perfect forms. The bowls were so finely crafted that they seemed to hum with a life of their own. A young apprentice named Kale came to study with her. Kale was talented but impatient. He was obsessed with creating a perfect pot, flawless, complete, a masterpiece that would last forever. He would work for hours on a single vessel, his brow furrowed in concentration. But every time he thought he had achieved perfection, he would find a tiny flaw, a slight asymmetry, a minuscule bubble in the glaze, a faint tremor from his own hand. In frustration, he would smash the pot and begin again. The workshop floor was littered with the shards of his own high expectations. One afternoon, after a particularly frustrating day, Kale watched as Asara sat at her wheel. She worked with joyful ease, her hands moving with the clay as if in a dance. She crafted a beautiful, elegant vase. But as she was lifting it from the wheel, her hand slipped, and a deep, jagged crack appeared down one side. Kale gasped, expecting her to be devastated. But Asara simply smiled. She took a small brush, and instead of discarding the vase, she began to paint a delicate golden lacquer along the line of the crack, transforming the flaw into a shimmering vein of gold. Then she placed the vase in a special part of her studio, alongside dozens of other pieces, each with its own golden repair. This was the art of kintsugi, the art of embracing breakage and imperfection. You are trying to create a pot that denies its own nature, Isara said to Kale, her voice full of warmth. Clay is of the earth. It is fragile. It is meant to change, to crack, to one day return to dust. To fight this is to fight the clay itself. A pot's life is a journey of transformation. The cracks tell the story of its journey. The heat of the kiln, the hands that held it, perhaps a fall. They are not signs of failure. They are marks of a life lived. She gestured to the vase with the golden seam. This crack did not make the vase less beautiful. It made it unique. It told its story. True beauty, Kale, is not the absence of flaws. It is the loving embrace of them. Kale looked at his own pile of broken shards, the remnants of his quest for impossible perfection. He had been trying to create something that stood outside of life, outside of time. Isara was showing him how to find beauty in the heart of life's fragility. He picked up 2 of his broken pieces, and for the first time, instead of seeing failure, he saw an opportunity. He began the slow, patient process of mending, not to hide the break, but to honor it. The wisdom of impermanence, the story of Isara, and the cracked pot is a profound metaphor for the teaching of impermanence. We are all like Kale, striving for a kind of perfection and permanence that life does not offer. We want our bodies to stay young and healthy, our relationships to remain in a state of perpetual harmony, and our moments of happiness to last forever. We treat life's cracks, our illnesses, our heartbreaks, our failures, as tragedies to be hidden or overcome. wisdom of Anika teaches us that these cracks are not mistakes. They are an inevitable and essential part of our journey. The Buddha's teaching on impermanence is a call to see life as it truly is, a continuous, dynamic flow. Everything we can perceive with our senses, from our own thoughts and emotions to the stars in the sky, is in a state of constant transformation. Trying to hold on to any of it is like trying to grasp a handful of water. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it slips through your fingers. Our suffering is the tension in that squeeze. Integration into daily life. How can we integrate this profound understanding of impermanence into the fabric of our lives? The practice is not about intellectual understanding, but about direct felt experience. It begins with the gentle art of paying attention, natural observation. A simple but powerful practice is to choose one natural phenomenon and observe it regularly. It could be a tree outside your window, the moon in the night sky, or even a houseplant on your desk. Make a point to look at it each day. Notice the subtle changes. Inner world observation. Become a curious observer of your own inner world. Sit quietly for a few minutes each day and simply watch the flow of your thoughts and feelings. Don't try to stop them or change them. Imagine you are sitting on the bank of a river, watching leaves and twigs float by. Just watch them arise, linger for a moment, and then dissolve. Notice that you are not the thoughts. You are the awareness that is watching them. Letting go meditation. At the end of your day, find a comfortable position and mentally review the events of the day. As you bring each event to mind, consciously practice letting it go. You can visualize placing it on a leaf and watching it float away down a river. Non-self, the illusion of identity. Now we turn our attention inward to one of the Buddha's most subtle and liberating teachings. This is the doctrine of anatta, or non-self. This teaching can sound strange or even frightening at first, because it seems to challenge the very foundation of who we believe we are. We live our lives with a strong sense of I, or me, at the center of our experience. An inner commander who is thinking our thoughts, feeling our emotions, and making our decisions. But the Buddha invited us to look for this solid, separate self, and to see if we can actually find it. The story of the chariot. In a monastery known for its silent gardens, there lived a monk named Jin. He was plagued by a relentless inner critic. His mind was a constant stream of self-judgment. My meditation is not deep enough. I am not as compassionate as the other monks. I will never be enlightened. This sense of a flawed, inadequate self was a heavy cloak he wore day and night. He believed that this I was a solid, real entity that was failing at its spiritual task. One day, the abbot of the monastery, a wise old master, called Jin to his chambers. He didn't speak, but instead handed Jin a beautiful, ornate chariot, a small-scale model that was a masterpiece of craftsmanship. "Tell me, Jin," the abbot said, "what is this?" "It is a chariot, master," Jin replied. "Are you sure?" the abbot asked, his eyes twinkling. Then he began to dismantle the model. He removed one of the wheels. "Is this wheel the chariot?" "No, master," said Jin. The abbot removed the other wheel, the axle, the frame, the decorative canopy. With each piece, he asked the same question, and each time Jin's answer was the same. "No, master." Soon all the individual parts of the chariot lay, disassembled, on the floor. "Now where is the chariot?" the abbot asked. "The chariot," Jin said slowly, a look of dawning realization on his face, "is not a single thing. It is a temporary collection of parts working together. It is a name we give to process." The abbot smiled a deep, knowing smile. "And so it is with the self you are so worried about," he said. "You look for this I that is failing, this Jin who is not good enough. But where is he? Is he your body? Your body is constantly changing, made of parts that are not you. Is he your thoughts? Your thoughts are like clouds appearing and disappearing. Are they you? Is he your feelings? Your feelings are like the weather, always shifting. Are they you?" He gestured to the disassembled parts on the floor. "What you call self is just like this chariot. It is a collection of changing processes, body, feelings, perceptions, thoughts, and consciousness. We give this collection a name, a story, and then we mistake that name for a solid, unchanging thing. But there is no permanent I sitting in the driver's seat. There is just the process of life unfolding, dependent origination, interconnection, this realization that the separate self is an illusion naturally leads us to our next exploration. This is the teaching of dependent origination, or pradityasamutpada. This beautiful and profound doctrine illuminates the very fabric of reality and shows us that absolutely nothing exists on its own. Everything arises in dependence on other factors. The story of the grain of rice. There is a teaching story told of a solitary monk named Sela, who went to a remote cave in the mountains to deepen his meditation. He wanted to find a peace that was entirely his own, untouched by the messiness and noise of the world. For his daily meal, he had a single bowl of rice, which a villager would silently leave at the mouth of his cave each morning. One day, as he prepared to eat, he looked closely at the small white grains in his bowl. His teacher's words echoed in his mind. "Look deeply at any one thing, and you will see the whole universe." Sela decided to try. He focused his entire attention on a single grain of rice. At first, he saw only a tiny white object, but as his mind stilled, his vision deepened. He saw the farmer who had planted the rice seed, his back bent under the hot sun, his hands calloused from work. He saw the rich, dark earth that had nourished the seed and the monsoon rains that had watered it. Rains that had traveled as clouds from a distant ocean. He saw the sun, a fiery star millions of miles away, whose light was essential for the rice stalk to grow. He saw the people who had harvested the rice, those who had milled it, and the one who had transported it to the market. He saw the villager who, with an act of quiet generosity, cooked the rice and brought it to his cave. He saw the potter who had crafted his simple clay bowl and the fire that had hardened it. He continued looking and saw that the farmer could not have worked without the food he ate. This food was grown by other farmers. The rain could not have formed without the ocean, and the ocean could not exist without the rivers. Everything was connected. His simple bowl of rice contained the sun, the clouds, the earth, and the labor and kindness of countless people. It was a universe in miniature. In that moment, Sella's sense of isolation shattered. His quest for a separate, independent peace suddenly seemed absurd. He realized that even here in his remote cave, he was not alone. He was deeply, inextricably connected to everything and everyone. He bowed to the bowl of rice, not as a monk eating a meal, but as a man receiving the universe. His heart, once closed in pursuit of solitary purity, broke open with a profound sense of gratitude and connection to all life. The middle way, the art of balance, having seen that we are part of a vast, interconnected flow, we now arrive at a very practical question. How do we navigate this flow? The Buddha's answer is beautifully elegant. We walk the middle way. This is not a path of compromise or mediocrity. It is a dynamic, intelligent path of balance that avoids the two extremes that cause so much suffering: the extreme of sensual indulgence and the extreme of harsh self-mortification. The Buddha's journey, the story of the middle way, is the story of the Buddha's own life. Before his enlightenment, he lived as Prince Siddhartha, surrounded by every imaginable luxury. He had beautiful palaces, fine clothes, delicious food, and was shielded from all sights of suffering. He lived in the extreme of sensual indulgence, chasing happiness through pleasure. Yet, despite having everything, he felt a deep spiritual emptiness. He realized that this kind of happiness was fragile, dependent on external conditions, and could never lead to lasting peace. So he left the palace and swung to the opposite extreme. He became a wandering ascetic practicing severe self-denial. He fasted until his ribs showed, slept on beds of thorns, and held his breath for long periods. For 6 years, he pushed his body to the brink of death. But enlightenment did not come. He only became weak, and his mind grew clouded. One day, collapsed by a river and close to death, he heard a musician on a passing boat teaching a student how to tune a sitar. The string, the musician said, must not be too tight or it will snap, and it must not be too loose or it will not make a sound. The perfect note is found in the middle. In that moment, Siddhartha had a profound insight. His whole spiritual search had been like tuning that sitar. He had tried the loose string of indulgence and the tight string of asceticism. Neither had worked. The path to awakening must lie in the middle. At that moment, A village girl named Sujata, seeing his emaciated state, offered him a bowl of rice milk. He accepted Sujata's offering. The nourishing food restored his strength, calmed his body, and cleared his mind. With this newfound balance, he sat beneath the bodhi tree, not too tight, not too loose, and resolved not to move until he had found the truth. It was from this place of centered, balanced awareness that he finally achieved enlightenment, living the middle way. To walk the middle way is to become a master of the art of living. It is a path that requires constant awareness and gentle self-correction, listening inward. The first practical step is to cultivate the quality of listening inward. Before you eat, ask your body, what do I truly need for nourishment? Before you take on another project, ask yourself, do I have the energy for this, or do I need rest? Awareness of extremism patterns. Become aware of your own patterns of extremism. Are you too hard on yourself or too lenient? Do you push yourself to burnout, or do you shy away from effort? Simply notice your tendencies without judgment. Metta, loving kindness. From this place of balance, we can now open our hearts. The wisdom teachings in Buddhism are often compared to one wing of a bird, and compassion is the other. Both are needed to fly. Vimal's story. In a small monastery nestled in a forest, there was a monk named Vimal. He was diligent in his studies and disciplined in his meditation, but his heart was hard. He was quick to find fault in the other monks. One was too loud, another too lazy, a third too proud. Most of all, he was harsh with himself. Every perceived mistake in his practice was met with a barrage of internal criticism. His mind was a battlefield, and he was becoming exhausted and bitter. One day his teacher, a gentle old master, called him over. Vimal, he said, your mind is like a parched field where nothing can grow. You water it only with the salt of judgment. From now on, you will put aside your other studies. Your only practice will be this. You will take a small, smooth stone, and for 1 hour each day, you will walk the forest path and repeat the words, may I be happy. May I be at peace. Vimal thought the instruction was foolish. How will repeating empty words help me? He protested. The hardness in your heart is your greatest lack of discipline, the master replied softly. Just do as I say. Reluctantly, Vimal began the practice. For the first few days, he felt ridiculous. He muttered the phrases through clenched teeth, his mind screaming in protest. The words felt like lies. Happy. I am miserable, peaceful. I am at war. He felt no kindness, only irritation. But he had promised his teacher. So he continued. After a week, something began to shift. One day, as he was walking, he saw a small deer cleaning its fawn. The mother deer was so gentle, so tender. A faint but warm feeling stirred in Vimal's chest. That day, when he repeated the phrase, may I be happy, it felt slightly less like a lie. He continued his practice. He started to notice small things. the way the sunlight filtered through the leaves, the scent of the damp earth, the sound of a distant stream. One day he saw another monk stumble and drop a stack of firewood. Vimal's first instinct was to judge him as clumsy. But then a new thought arose, unbidden. May he be at ease. It was quiet, but it was there. He walked over and helped the monk gather the wood. And for the first time, he looked him in the eyes and sent a genuine smile. His main practice continued to be for himself. May I be happy. May I be at peace. The phrases became smoother, less forced. He began to feel a sliver of the peace he was wishing for. He realized that for years he had been treating himself like an enemy. This practice was the first time he had ever actively offered himself kindness. The hardness in his heart, like a frozen river in spring, began to thaw. One day the master saw him sitting by the stream, no longer holding the stone, simply watching the water flow. Vimal's face was soft, his eyes clear. The field is no longer parched, is it? The master asked. Vimal bowed, his heart full of a quiet, warm gratitude. No, master, he said. The rain has finally come, the natural purity of mind, as the warmth of loving kindness begins to permeate our being. It helps to melt away the layers of judgment and fear that obscure our true nature. This leads us to one of the most beautiful and encouraging teachings in the Buddhist tradition, the idea that our fundamental awareness is inherently pure, luminous, and clear. The Buddha described the mind in its natural state as being like a clear sky, and our thoughts, emotions, and memories are like passing clouds. The story of the poor traveler. There is a beloved story from the East about a poor traveler who, weary from a long journey, fell asleep on the roadside. He was a man defined by his poverty. His coat was a patchwork of rags, thin and offering little protection from the cold. While he slept, a wealthy merchant who was a close friend came by. Seeing his friend in such a state of suffering, his heart was filled with compassion. The merchant possessed a priceless diamond, a flawless and radiant jewel of unimaginable brilliance. He wanted to give his friend a new life, to end his suffering forever. Not wanting to wake him and cause a fuss, the merchant carefully and with great love sewed the diamond deep into the inner hem of the traveler's worn and tattered coat. Then, with a silent blessing, he continued on his way. The traveler awoke some time later, stretched his aching limbs, and felt the familiar pang of hunger. He was completely unaware of his new fortune. He continued his life of poverty, wandering from town to town, begging for scraps of food and a place to sleep. For years he lived this way, his suffering a constant companion. He cursed his fate and envied the wealthy, never knowing that he carried the treasure. The diamond, forgotten and hidden, traveled with him through dust and rain, through cities and forests, its brilliant light completely obscured by a thin layer of cloth. One day, years later, he he happened to cross paths with the same merchant friend. The merchant was shocked to see him still living in such misery. "My friend," he cried out, his voice a mixture of astonishment and compassion. "What have you been doing all this time? Why are you still living like this? I gave you a priceless jewel years ago." The traveler looked at him, bewildered. "You gave me nothing," he mumbled. The merchant knelt down, took the hem of the traveler's ragged coat, and with his knife carefully cut the threads he had sewn so long ago. The diamond fell into his palm, catching the sunlight and exploding into 1,000 points of brilliant, dazzling light. The traveler stared speechless. He had been a rich man all along, but he had been living as a pauper because he didn't know the treasure he possessed. This story is a perfect allegory for our own human situation. The Buddha taught that within each of us, sewn into the very fabric of our being, is a Buddha nature. A nature that is as pure, brilliant, and indestructible as that diamond. This core of our being is our innate capacity for wisdom, for boundless compassion, for unshakable peace. It cannot be damaged by our trauma. It cannot be stained by our mistakes, and it cannot be diminished by our confusion. It is always there, whole and complete. The problem is that, like the traveler, we don't know it. We identify with our worn and tattered coat, our fleeting anxious thoughts, our painful and stormy emotions, our self-critical stories. The entire spiritual path, then, is not about becoming a better person or acquiring a diamond we don't have. It is the process of realizing the diamond is already ours. Nirvana, ultimate freedom. And where does this path lead? What is the final shore that the raft was built to reach? In Buddhism, the ultimate goal, the fruition of the entire path, is called nirvana. Nirvana is not a heaven-like paradise that we go to after we die. It is a state of being that is available right here in this very life. The word literally means to extinguish or to blow out. What is extinguished? The fires of greed, hatred, and delusion. It is the complete and utter cessation of suffering and its causes. It is the mind's final, unshakable liberation. It is the experience of profound and lasting peace that comes from seeing reality exactly as it is. Imagine you have been carrying a massive, heavy boulder on your back for your entire life. You have carried it for so long that you have forgotten what it feels like to be without it. You assume that the aching in your shoulders and the strain in your legs is just the normal state of being. Then one day, through great practice and insight, you finally understand that you can put the boulder down. You lean over, and with a great sigh of release, you let it roll off your back and settle onto the earth. In that moment, what do you feel? An indescribable lightness, a freedom you never knew was possible, a profound sense of ease and relief. The air feels different. The light looks brighter. You can stand up straight for the first time. You can run. You can dance. That feeling of relief, of unburdening, of final release, that is a metaphor for nirvana. It is not an escape from life. It is the beginning of truly living, free from the crushing weight of our mental burdens. Nirvana is the natural result of seeing the truths we have been exploring. When you truly and deeply realize the truth of impermanence, your clinging to fleeting pleasures is extinguished. When you truly and deeply realize the truth of non-self, the ego's desperate projects of self-preservation and self-aggrandizement are extinguished, concluding with Zen stories. Now let us conclude our journey with some timeless Zen stories. First story: where did this anger come from? Yamoka Teshu was a young and intellectually gifted Zen student who had spent considerable time studying Buddhist philosophy and believed he had developed a sophisticated understanding of the deepest teachings. He decided to visit Master Doan. When he was granted an audience with the master, he found him sitting quietly in his simple room, smoking his bamboo pipe with calm composure. Master, Yamoka began, I have come to share with you my understanding of the fundamental nature of reality as taught by the Buddha. He proceeded to articulate what he considered a masterful summary of sophisticated Buddhist philosophy. Mind, Buddha, and sentient beings, after all, do not exist in any ultimate sense. Everything we perceive and experience is, when examined closely, empty of inherent existence. Throughout this lengthy philosophical presentation, Master Doan continued smoking his pipe in silence, showing no particular reaction to Yamoka's elaborate exposition of Buddhist metaphysics. When Yamoka finished his discourse and waited expectantly for some acknowledgement of his understanding, Master Doan made no verbal response. Instead, he continued smoking quietly for several more moments. Then, without any warning or explanation, Master Doan picked up his bamboo pipe and struck Yamoka hard on the head with it. The blow was unexpected and quite painful. Yamoka immediately jumped up from his seated position, his face flushed with anger and indignation. Why did you hit me? He demanded, his voice filled with outrage. Master Doan looked at the angry young man with a slight smile. If nothing exists, he said calmly, where did this anger come from? Yamoka stood there speechless, his entire philosophical framework suddenly revealed as inadequate to address his immediate experience. Second story: no water, no moon. Chiono had devoted many years to intensive Zen study and practice. She spent countless hours in meditation, wrestling with profound koans and contemplating the deepest teachings of the Buddha. Her dedication was unwavering, despite her sincere efforts and obvious commitment. Enlightenment continued to elude her. She could understand the concepts intellectually, speak eloquently about emptiness and non-duality, and even guide other students through basic meditation techniques. But the final breakthrough, the direct realization that would transform her understanding completely, remained just beyond her grasp. One night, After a particularly long day of meditation and study, Chiyono was walking slowly back to her small quarters. She carried an old wooden water pail that she had filled at the well earlier that evening. The pail was ancient, held together by strips of bamboo that had grown worn and weak with age. As she walked through the moonlit courtyard, she became mesmerized by the sight before her. The full moon hung perfectly in the dark sky above, its bright light illuminating the temple grounds with a soft, ethereal glow. But what captured her attention was the reflection of that moon in the water she carried. There, contained within her humble pail, was a perfect, unbroken circle of light. The moon itself, complete and radiant, held in water. She walked carefully, almost reverently, watching this reflected moon dance gently with each step she took. The image was so clear, so perfect, that it seemed as real as the moon in the sky above. Suddenly, without warning, the aged bamboo strips that held the pail together finally gave way. The bottom of the bucket fell out completely, and all the water rushed to the ground in a single swift motion. In an instant, the reflection of the moon vanished completely. With no water, there was no moon. At that precise moment, watching the reflected moon disappear as the water hit the earth, Chiyono experienced complete liberation. All her years of seeking, striving, and effort suddenly revealed themselves as unnecessary. The very thing she had been chasing, enlightenment, awakening, understanding, had never been separate from her to begin with. Like the moon's reflection, it had appeared to exist independently, but it was simply the natural expression of what was already present. Third story, the value of a diamond. A young student was walking along a riverbank one peaceful afternoon when something caught his eye. Reaching down, he picked up what appeared to be an unusually beautiful stone among the smooth stones at the water's edge. Larger than his fist, with a crystalline structure that caught the light in interesting ways, though he didn't know exactly what it was. Something about the stone's appearance suggested it might be more than just an ordinary river rock. Curious about his find, the student took the stone to his Zen master. "Master," he said, bowing respectfully, "I found this stone by the river. I wonder if it has any value at all, or if it's just an ordinary stone." The master examined the stone briefly, turning it over in his weathered hands. Without giving away what he might have suspected about its true nature, he looked at his student thoughtfully. "Go to the marketplace," he instructed, "and find out what people think this stone is worth. But remember this carefully. No matter what anyone offers you, do not sell it. Simply learn what they would pay and return to me with that information." Following his teacher's instructions, the student went first to the bustling marketplace in the center of town. He approached a merchant who was selling oranges from a colorful cart. "Excuse me," the student said politely, showing the man his stone. "Could you tell me what you think this might be worth?" The orange merchant glanced at the stone casually, seeing only an interesting but ultimately common rock. "Well," he said, after a moment's consideration, "it's certainly larger and prettier than most stones. I'd be willing to give you 10 oranges for it." The student thanked him respectfully and continued through the marketplace. Next, he approached a woman selling vegetables, her stall filled with fresh produce from the local farms. "What do you think this stone might be worth?" he asked. The vegetable seller looked more carefully than the orange merchant had, noting the stone's unusual clarity and weight. "This is quite an attractive specimen," she said thoughtfully. "I'd offer you a whole sack of my finest potatoes for it." Again, the student politely declined and moved on. He then sought out a goldsmith, a man whose expertise with precious materials was well known throughout the region. The goldsmith took the stone and examined it much more carefully than the previous merchants. He held it up to the light, studied its internal structure, and weighed it in his experienced hands. His eyes grew wide with recognition and excitement. "My boy," he said with obvious enthusiasm, "this is no ordinary stone. This is a very rare and valuable gem. I will give you 500 gold coins for it." The student was amazed by this dramatic increase in the stone's perceived value. But he remembered his master's instructions and respectfully declined the goldsmith's generous offer. Finally, he sought out the most respected jeweler in the entire city, an elderly man renowned for his expertise with the most precious stones and his service to wealthy nobles and royalty. The old jeweler took the stone with reverent care, holding it up to examine it in the bright light streaming through his shop window. He turned it slowly, studying every facet and internal reflection. His expression gradually transformed from professional interest to profound awe and wonder. After several minutes of careful examination, he gently placed the stone on a soft velvet cloth and looked at the student with deep respect. "Young man," he said in a voice filled with reverence, "where did you acquire this extraordinary treasure? This is not merely a stone. It is one of the most magnificent diamonds I have ever encountered in my entire career. It is absolutely priceless. I could not afford to purchase it. Even if I sold everything I own, my entire shop, my house, all my possessions combined would not be sufficient to pay for what this is truly worth." The student returned to his master with wonder and confusion, recounting each encounter and the dramatically different valuations he had received. The Zen master listened to each part of the story with a knowing smile when the student had finished. "You see," the master said gently, "the orange merchant and the vegetable seller saw only an interesting rock because that was the limit of their perception. The goldsmith recognized its material value because he had the knowledge to identify precious stones. But only the master jeweler could see its true immeasurable worth because he possessed the deepest understanding and the most refined perception." The master paused, looking directly into a student's eyes. Your life is like that diamond. You can choose to see yourself as having little value, like the first merchants did. You can recognize some of your worth, like the goldsmith did, or you can understand that you are absolutely priceless, as the master jeweler recognized. The choice of how to value yourself depends entirely on the quality of perception you bring to looking at your own life. Now, as our journey through these teachings comes to a gentle close, together we have come a long way. From acknowledging the simple friction of life to the deep peace of letting go, we have seen that our suffering comes not from life itself, but from our resistance to its flow. We have discovered that beneath the passing clouds of our thoughts and emotions, the sky of our awareness is always clear and untouched. We have learned to tune the strings of our hearts, to find the middle way of balance, and to water the garden of our minds with unconditional loving kindness. We have seen that we are not isolated islands, but waves in a single magnificent ocean of being. Now let us bring these threads together in a final moment of practice. Find a comfortable position and gently close your eyes. Take a deep breath in and a long, slow breath out. Let your body feel heavy, supported, and at rest. Bring your awareness to the feeling of the air touching your nostrils. Just for this moment, let this be your anchor. If thoughts arise, see them as clouds drifting through the vast open sky of your mind. You are the sky, not the clouds. Let them come and let them go. Now feel into your heart space. Imagine a small warm light in the center of your chest. With every in-breath, imagine this light growing a little brighter, a little warmer. With every out-breath, imagine this warmth radiating through your entire body. This is the light of your own innate goodness, your Buddha nature. It has always been here. Simply rest in this warmth, in this gentle, loving presence. You are safe. You are whole. You are at peace. There is nothing else to do, nowhere else to go. Just this, just here, just now. Thank you for walking this path with me. Rest well.